Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast. The songs and stories of a music icon.
Hello and welcome to a bonus minisode of Numan News on Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast with me, Tom. So since the last update, Gary's A Perfect Circle live DVD and album from his Wembley Arena show was released, and it reached number 34 in the UK album chart, which is pretty good going for a live album, and one of his best charting live albums for a long time, and his 20th UK Top 40 album, if I've done my maths correct, including all live albums, compilations, etc. Record Collector released a Gary Numan themed special, a 116-page magazine similar to the classic pop one a few months back. Annoyingly, I somehow forgot to order this one, so I'm hoping there's still some available. Gary is still preparing his Telecon shows in late 2025, and the big news is that daughter Raven will be supporting him on these shows, the first time she's properly done that, and I guess the first run of her proper live shows herself, so a big moment for her and the family. If you haven't already, please check out my interview with Raven, and I look forward to seeing both Numans on that tour. And if you're a Patreon subscriber of his, you'll have heard in his latest Q&A that he was pondering whether to have any Telecon-themed artifacts in the foyers, maybe the Teletour car.
I was going to get it all working, so the electrics and everything was all repaired, and I could sort of drive it around again, not to ever use on stage again, but just so it was working. But it didn't really happen. And then I forgot all about it, and now I've stopped caring again. But I hadn't really thought about using it for Telecon, actually. That's a good idea. I don't know about having it on the side of the stage, because side of the stage is busy. There's stuff going on. You don't want a bloody great lump of metal stuck inside. I don't know if you could really see it much anyway. But whether we could use it somehow, some way, maybe, I don't know. Trouble is, you have to, it's big. And you have to cart it about, so it uses up all the truck space that you want to use for your your musical gear and the lights and all that. There's not a lot of space, but we might do. I think we're using a truck to carry everything around on the Telecon tour, so there might be room for it. But it's a big old lump to load in and load out each day just to have standing there somewhere. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I have to think about it. Maybe there's a way of having it in the foyer or something, and people can sit in it. But I don't know. Probably not. All those sort of ideas sound really, really good when you're coming up with them. Could have it in the foyer, and people could sit in it. Blah blah. But when you actually try to do it, there'll be things. Oh, the venue will say, oh, you've got to have security on it, because of insurance and blah blah blah. And it also, oh god, it just becomes such a health and safety load of fucking nonsense. So you just, I can't bother. A lot of things that you could do are sort of made impossible because of insurance cover and safety and all those things that don't seem to apply quite often, but that's the law and you're stuck with it. Did I ever tell you that story? I must have told you that story a long, long time ago with that car. If I have told you this, I apologise. But anyway, we were doing a gig in New Jersey, I think it was. And the unions were really, really strong in that time. And there was an electricians union and a props union. And we got to the gig expecting it to all be set up, because you're not allowed to touch anything. And only to find that it wasn't, that the car was still on the floor, the Telecon car. And there was an argument about whether the electricians should lift it onto the stage because it was electric, or whether the props people should lift it onto the stage because it was a prop. And the settlement was that they would each take one end each and do it together, and that satisfied the union requirement for mounting it onto the stage. And then they wouldn't let me drive it initially because that was a prop's job or an electrician's job. So, well, you can't get two people in it. So their idea, I think, was they were going to put the electrician in it, and I had to sit on his lap. Clearly couldn't happen. So we had to bribe we had to pay off the union with a chunk of money so that they just let me drive it on my own. It was the maddest thing ever. So that fucking car's been in trouble since we came out with the idea of it. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. But it would be nice to do something with it, but I honestly don't know whether it's actually feasible or not. But I'll ask a few questions.
Meanwhile, excitingly, it's been announced that an official Numan book is on the horizon. Next year, we'll see the publication of Gary Numan, A People's History by Spenwood Books of Manchester. And it says, this oral history will tell Gary's story through the words of fans, friends and collaborators. Spenwood want to hear your memories, whether it's seeing Gary in concert, having a favourite song, or talking about your album collection. You might have been a fan since the beginning, or you might have just discovered Gary and his music. Either way, Spen would want to hear from you at garynewmanbook@gmail.com. It says that stories should be around 400 to 500 words in length. Every submission will receive an acknowledgement from the book's editor, and as they approach publication, they'll let you know if your story has made it into the book. So there you go. I'm not in any way affiliated with that book, but a little bit of free publicity there for it. But yeah, really look forward to that one. Gary has now set out on his latest US tour as a joint one with the Psychedelic Furs. So let me know if any of you are going to any of those shows and what they're like. I'm quite intrigued by the format, like he did with Ministry. Gary has said that he loves them as it allows him to do bigger venues in the States and helps bring in new audiences. So let me know if you've been. He did say in a recent post that the first show of the tour had several issues and fuck-ups on stage, but that apparently it didn't seem to bother the crowd. But we all know that Gary is such a perfectionist, so he's probably being unfairly hard on himself. Meanwhile, there's a new podcast that's just started that you'll no doubt want to hear. It's called States of Independence. It's a 13-episode look back at Beggar's Banquet and its history. So it features interviews of Martin Mills and Gary, of course, in its first 2 episodes. They're definitely worth a look.
It began as 3 friends and a humble record shop.
We had £2,000 each. Steve knew how to buy new records. I knew how to buy old records. And Nick knew how to bullshit.
It ended up as one of the most influential record labels of all time.
Every success that they have, I punch the air.
The fact they're still around is a miracle if you think about it.
Everything that happened in between.
I thought, I've come across something which is going to change music. It's going to change everything.
Well, that's the stuff that legends are made of.
He and I had chemistry that went off the charts. It was iconic, and it changed the world.
And that's when the money got serious, and that's when a whole other level of issues start arising, kids. When you've got FU money, then you start going, well, do I really need this? Do I really like him?
And I went back out and sat on the stage on my own for ages, just looking out at the empty hall and just thinking, what the fuck have you done?
And similarly, Gary has just appeared on a new BBC Radio 6 music programme called Grounding. It'll be a 3-part series that he's on. You can listen to it on iPlayer, where Gary opens up about being autistic and the role obsession plays in both his music and life. It also features music from 9 Inch Nails and ends with a 20-minute calm mix. So definitely worth checking out.
Welcome to Grounding on 6 Music, a musical exploration of what it means to be an artist with a neurodivergent mind. My name is Gary Numan, and I see myself not so much as a musician, more an arranger of noises. For those people who are unfamiliar, neurodiversity refers to people whose brains develop or work differently for some reason. It means we have different strengths and struggles from people whose brains develop or work more typically. Being neurodivergent is different for everyone. I have Asperger's, which today means I'm on the autism spectrum. For me, that simply means I interact with the world a little differently than most people. This series gives me the opportunity to share my own personal stories, thoughts and feelings about being neurodivergent.
Now, this is a surprising one. Gary will soon appear in the TV show Celebrity Help My House is Haunted, which will air on Discovery Plus in October. And I've managed to watch it in advance, and I've seen these shows before, and essentially features people who say their homes have been haunted by ghosts of some description, and these mediums come in and try and help. Now, it's up to you whether you believe in that kind of stuff, but watching it, Gary most certainly does, as does his family. Raven and Persia also appear. It'll be available soon, and it was awesome to watch as a Numan fan and to get to see inside his lavish castle in Scotland, so definitely worth watching when that's out. Recently, I went to see Tubeway Days live again in Kent. A brilliant show if you want a note-perfect tribute act that sounds just like 1980 era Numan. And I got to meet singer Chris Fielding in person, who was very gracious with his time. You can see a photo of us on my socials. And there are plans in place for him and the band to come back on the podcast soon. So thanks to a couple of you as well who said hello to me and my wife. Hugely appreciated to see or hear from any listeners. And I also went to see a great Q&A with John Fox in London, who was obviously a big influence on Gary. Got to meet him and get a photo, which was awesome. But he also spoke about Gary, and I managed to catch a bit of it.
Before he had Our Friends Electric in the charts, electronic music was a fringe activity, really. And then suddenly it all changed for everyone who was connected with electronics. And Gary is the one who broke the dam. And he was the dam buster, wasn't he? He did it. And no one realised at first really what was happening. And then suddenly record companies started to take electronic musicians seriously. And they never had before. I mean, you get indies, you know, we were all sort of working with indies or whatever. And then, but I mean, I'd started with Ireland, which was a small record company in its day. It wasn't what you call a major record company, but it was still a record company. But most of the other people were on independent record labels that had begun with punk, really. And so these kind of events were all accumulating around that period, weren't they? Yeah. And suddenly you realise that there's a movement, and then Gary broke the dam open and wham, off we went.
So on these bonus episodes, depending on what month it is as I record it, I thought it would be cool to look back at one particular moment from Numan history. And as it's September, let's go back to 1979 and the touring principle. It's quite amazing, really, that it was only that summer that he became known with Our Friends Electric and Replicas. Then Cars came in late August, followed by the Pleasure Principle. And by September 20th, he started the touring principle, taking in 16 shows across September and October. It kicked off in Glasgow at the Apollo, and it included 2 nights at the then Hammersmith Apollo. And yeah, man, I wish I was around at that time to see any of these gigs. I can't quite imagine what it must have been like. But I've obviously seen the videos many times, and it is truly a showcase of how Gary became one of the biggest pop stars, leading a new musical movement in late 79 as the 80s came into view. As ever, I'd love to hear from you and your own personal Numan story, how you found him and his music and what he means to you and how you became a Numanoid. Just like Chris Anderson did, who sent me a really lovely email, so I thought I'd read that out now. First, thank you for your Electric Friends podcast. I stumbled onto them a few months ago, started at the bottom and worked my way up. The recent On Broadway episode really stood out, a brilliant song and a fitting tribute. Thank you, Chris. I want to share my story of how I found Gary Numan and how his music has stayed with me for nearly my whole life. I was about 11 when I discovered pop music by accident. My mum brought me Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I'm not sure why, but it changed everything. I started mowing lawns for spending money, and every Saturday my dad would drop me off at the local record shop so I could buy something Beatles related. Then one day in early 79, I walked in and heard something completely new. It wasn't the Beatles, it was Gary Numan's Replicas. Shop owner had imported a few copies from England, and I brought one right away. From then on, the Beatles took a back seat. Gary's music had me hooked. Soon I was collecting Tubeway Army records, even nabbed a copy of the Gatefold That's Too Bad Bombers EP. When the Pleasure Principle came out, I was all in. My first shot at seeing him live was in 1982 at Bogart's in Cincinnati, but the venue was 21 and over and I was too young. I even sent Gary a typed letter to the club, but I never knew if it reached him. Fast forward to 2001 and Gary returned to Bogart's on the Pure Tour. I finally got tickets, and after the show I met him at his tour bus. Back then there were no official meet and greets, you just waited and hoped. Gary didn't disappoint. He signed my blue vinyl copy of Tubeway Army, my most treasured piece of Numan memorabilia. Over the years I've seen him many more times, back at Bogart's, in Nashville for Splinter, and in Atlanta. My wife and I even went to meet and greets, and Gary was always generous with his time. But the most unforgettable show came in Louisville in 2018. Our son Sagan has special needs. He's non-verbal, but it was obvious he loved music, especially Queen and Gary Numan. I decided to take him to see Gary at Headliners Music Hall. I called ahead to the venue to let them know that we'd be coming with a wheelchair. I figured we'd be put in the back, but instead they placed us right under the stage inside the security barrier. The show was incredible. The band noticed Sagan, and afterwards a guard told me that Gary had tossed his guitar pick and it landed in Sagan's lap. Later, while getting him into the car, I found it in his chair, but the moment I'll never forget came at the very end. As the band left the stage, Gary walked over, leaned down, and placed the set list on Sagan's chest. It was such a simple gesture, but full of kindness and humanity. For us, it was unforgettable. Gary's music has always been part of my life for nearly 5 decades, and your podcast keeps adding even more light to that world. Thank you, Chris, Sagan, and Kim. And he says, P.S. I had a sort of Splinter-themed wedding, and he attached some photos of him and wife Kim in the wedding outfits, including the Splinter hat, if you can picture that. So yeah, thanks so much for that, Chris. That was a really lovely story, and it really touched me. And I got goosebumps reading that. So thanks very much for that. And if you'd like to send me your story or to say anything in particular, just email me, newmanpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find me on all the socials @NewmanPodcast and find more at newmanpodcast.com. That's about it this time. I'll be back for a new episode soon, so let me know which songs or other Numan topics you'd like me to cover. And if you have any bit more quirky Numan news that I may miss, even if it's from a couple of months ago, let me know. But for now, stay safe, stay calm, and speak soon.
Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast. The songs and stories of a music icon.